There is a number that should genuinely disturb you. The top 1% of American earners, households pulling in $500,000 or more per year, carry an average of $97,000 in non mortgage consumer debt. Not medical debt, not emergency debt, revolving, accumulating, lifestyle sustaining debt. And the financial planning industry has almost entirely failed to explain why. Because the standard explanation that high earners simply spend too much is both correct and completely useless. It describes the symptom while ignoring the mechanism. What's actually happening inside the minds of high income households is something behavioral economists have documented for decades, and almost nobody is framing it correctly. Your salary is not your financial problem. The psychological architecture your salary builds around itself is the problem. And that architecture is what's going to determine whether you retire with assets or with regret. Let me start with something called lifestyle anchoring, because this is where the damage originates. When your income jumps, your reference point for what counts as normal jumps with it. This is not a character flaw. It's a documented cognitive process. Psychologists studying income transitions found that within 24 months of a significant raise, most high earners had mentally reclassified their new spending level as the baseline, not an upgrade. The $180 dinner that felt extravagant at $80,000 a year feels like a reasonable Wednesday at $280,000. The luxury car lease that once seemed aspirational now feels like the appropriate vehicle for someone at your income level. Your brain isn't overspending. Your brain is maintaining what it now perceives as the standard. And that perceptual shift is nearly invisible while it's happening, which is precisely what makes it so destructive. Now, here's what makes this worse. High earners don't just upgrade their lifestyle once, they upgrade in layers, each layer building on the previous one. Each new expense quickly normalized before the next arrives. Researchers at Northwestern studying consumption patterns among households earning above $250,000 found that discretionary spending grew at nearly the same rate as income in a majority of cases. Not slower, the same rate, which means the wealth gap between what these households earned and what they kept stayed essentially constant, regardless of raises, bonuses, or promotions. More money coming in, more money leaving, the margin almost never widening. Most people assume higher earners save more as a percentage of income. The data does not support that assumption nearly as often as it should. There's a second mechanism at work, and this one is more subtle. It's called the wealth illusion, and your mind is almost certainly running it right now if your income has grown meaningfully in the last 5 years. The wealth illusion describes the cognitive tendency to substitute income for assets when assessing financial security. A household earning $400,000 a year feels wealthy. They feel secure. They feel like the kind of people who don't need to think too hard about a budget. And because they feel financially safe, their threat detection system stops sounding alarms, the gym membership, the private school tuition, the second home mortgage, the boat that needs maintenance, each of these expenditures gets processed not as a wealth drain, but as a natural expression of what their income level allows. The problem is that income stops the moment the job stops. Assets do not. Let me ask you this. How many genuinely high-earning people do you know? People with impressive salaries, impressive titles, impressive homes, who you suspect are one layoff away from serious financial difficulty. You're not wrong about them. A Federal Reserve study found that 36% of adults earning between $75,000 and $100,000 said they couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing. At higher income bands, the number improves, but not nearly as much as the salary difference would suggest, because the income is real. The cushion is not. High earners build expensive lives first and saving structures second, or sometimes not at all. That sequencing is the core of the problem. Now, let's talk about what behavioral economists call mental accounting. because this explains something that confuses a lot of people. How can someone earning $350,000 a year feel financially squeezed? The answer is that high earners have more mental buckets than almost anyone else, and those buckets carry enormous social and psychological weight. The private school tuition bucket, the second home expense bucket, the retirement account bucket that never quite gets filled because the others drain first. When one bucket overflows, maybe a sudden home repair or an unexpected tax bill, the high earner doesn't cut from lifestyle. They borrow against future income or liquidate something they shouldn't touch. The buckets are arranged by emotional priority, not financial priority. And emotional priority almost always protects the lifestyle expenses over the wealth building ones. There is also a phenomenon called the income trap, which describes what happens when fixed costs scale with earnings over a long period. A family that earned $120,000 and now earns $380,000 has not simply gotten richer. They have likely acquired a mortgage calibrated to $380,000, car payments calibrated to $380,000, private school tuitions calibrated to $380,000, and a social circle whose spending expectations are calibrated to $380,000. Their fixed costs have become structurally dependent on that income level continuing. This is not a choice they made in a single moment. It accumulated over years of incremental decisions, each one individually defensible, collectively catastrophic. One income disruption and the entire structure becomes unsustainable simultaneously. That is not a wealth Paul. Sitchin. That is a high income version of living paycheck to paycheck. Here's where loss aversion enters the picture, and this is the part most financial advisors don't discuss openly enough. Downgrading a lifestyle is psychologically far more painful than never having upgraded it. Research from Princeton confirmed that losses register as roughly twice as emotionally intense as equivalent gains. A high earner who has spent 3 years at a certain standard of living doesn't experience cutting that standard as returning to neutral. Their nervous system registers it as loss, real, painful, threatening loss. So when the financial pressure builds, when the numbers clearly say the vacation home should go or the private school should be reconsidered, the default response is almost never to downgrade. It's to find another income source, extend another credit line, defer another retirement contribution. The lifestyle gets protected because giving it up doesn't feel like a trade. It feels like a defeat. The tax dimension makes all of this worse in ways that surprise even financially literate people. High earners in the United States can pay effective federal rates well above 35% on income above certain thresholds. And in high tax states, combined marginal rates can approach or exceed 50%. This means a household that appears to earn $500,000 is actually building wealth from something considerably less after federal, state, payroll, and investment taxes are calculated. The gross income number that feels impressive is not the number available for saving, but the lifestyle is built around the gross number, not the net. That mismatch is almost universal among high earners who are struggling quietly, and almost nobody adjusts their spending to reflect what their income actually becomes after the government takes its share. There's a specific moment where this all becomes irreversible, and understanding it should concern you deeply if you're in a high earning decade right now. Financial researchers refer to it as the compounding failure point, the window during which meaningful wealth should be accumulating but isn't. For most high earners, peak income arrives somewhere between ages 40 and 55. That window represents the primary opportunity for serious wealth accumulation because the math of compound growth is still working in your favor. Miss it, and you are not just behind. You are behind in a way that additional income alone cannot fix. A 52-year-old who hasn't built substantial assets does not have time to fix that with a raise. Time was the asset, and it was spent maintaining a lifestyle instead of building a future. What you can control is more specific than most people expect. The first step is separating your financial identity from your income identity, which sounds simple and is genuinely difficult. Your income is what you earn. Your net worth is what you keep. High earners who retire with real financial security treated those two numbers as entirely separate projects. They capped lifestyle growth deliberately, often years before they had to, because they understood that the lifestyle would expand to fill every dollar available unless something actively prevented it. They built automatic saving structures that moved money before it touched their spending accounts. They made the wealth building contribution the fixed expense and treated lifestyle as the variable. That inversion is the core behavioral shift. The second thing you can control is your awareness of the wealth illusion before it calcifies into something harder to dismantle. If you feel financially comfortable because your income is high, that feeling is not the same as financial security. Comfort based on income is contingent. Security based on assets is durable. Every year you defer that distinction is a year the compounding gap widens. The high earners who die broke were not unintelligent. They were not irresponsible people. They were people who trusted the feeling of a high salary to do work that only accumulated assets can actually do. And by the time that distinction became undeniable, the window for correcting it had quietly closed.